The far-right, Christian machine has been great at doing bills and pushing them in one state, sampling them in the one state, and then marking them out to every state. And so I love that FFRF is taking this proactive approach in developing a bill that really seeds the groundwork of establishing the real version of religious freedom.
Hello and welcome to Secular Spotlight. I'm Jayne, Senior Policy Counsel at the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Today I'm joined by our State Policy Manager, Dudley. Today we're telling you about a new bill that we've been working on that's designed to keep students protected from religious coercion in public schools. In some states we're calling this the Student Secular Bill of Rights, but we're also affectionately referring to it as the KPOP Act, which stands for Keep Proselytizing Out of Public Schools. And of course, it's also a fun nod to the very popular K-pop Demon Hunters movie, which my kids are absolutely obsessed with. And so joining us for this discussion is the Executive Director of the Secular Student Alliance, Kevin Bolling. Thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Wonderful to be with you, both Ryans.
So let's kick off this discussion by talking about some of the problems that are facing secular families in public schools and how the K-pop Act is designed to help.
So what we're trying to do with the K-pop Act is we're trying to take solidified Supreme Court precedent surrounding the Establishment Clause that dates back generations and codify that into state law. What we're seeing at the Supreme Court level right now is they are all too willing to either chop away or completely dismantle the Establishment Clause. And if we can solidify this into state law, we can ensure the preservation of students' rights to freely go to school without religious indoctrination.
We'll dive into some of the specifics in just a moment, but Kevin, I'd love to bring you into this discussion. Do you want to just take a moment to let people know kind of who you are, introduce yourself, your background, and what the Secular Student Alliance is, what you've been up to lately, and then what you think of when you heard that this bill was proposed and how maybe it will impact your work?
For the Secular Student Alliance, I'm the executive director. The Secular Student Alliance is a national nonprofit in the secular movement, specifically focused on supporting non-religious students. So while our national office is located in Los Angeles, but the heart of what we do is our student chapters in high schools and colleges and universities across the country. As the growing percentage of students are not identifying with a particular religion, and we're almost at 50% now of young people who don't identify with a particular religion. Our work in supporting students wherever they are, college, university, high school, middle school, elementary school, homeschooling, we want to be there to support students, especially over the last year and last fall in the academic cycle. We have continued to see an encroachment of Christian nationalism, of Christian privilege in state legislatures that are impacting students directly. So this bill is great. I think we're all familiar with the Ten Commandments in schools. And that's been one of the latest pushes. And I think recently in Oklahoma with Samantha Vlanecki, who is using her Christian background to get out of doing an assignment. And now we have a state law being proposed in Oklahoma to make it so that in higher education, professors cannot penalize students for using their Christian perspective to do assignments. And in that case, she didn't do the assignment. And I think the important thing is, like this, what we see happening in one state spreads to other states. What we see happening in higher education, can easily be adapted into public schools in high schools as well. So this bill is important to us and making sure that we're reducing Christian privilege that we currently see propagating across the states, but also just preserving the true essence of what religious freedom is and freedom of speech for students.
Absolutely, and that's what we're aiming for largely with this bill. I'll also just mention, for anyone who's not familiar with the Secular Student Alliance, you have been a very strong ally of FFRF for a long time, as long as I've been around at FFRF. Kevin, you and the SSA have been there right with us. And of course, public schools is the main battleground where state church issues come up. So we are so appreciative of the work that you do. Ryan, do you want to jump in?
Kevin, something that you said that I think kind of highlights the need for this bill is you commented on the growing number or the increasing number of non-religious students or secular students that you're seeing coming through high school and just younger people being more secular. I think this bill actually is necessary to protect those students, because I think as the number of secular students grows, the more that the Christian nationalists are going to really want to hold on to their reign of power and, as you said, privilege. I think this bill is a great protection against such things.
Absolutely. So maybe let's go through and get a little more granular with what exactly we're trying to do with this bill. So let's touch on a few of the problems that we're seeing in public schools. Kevin, you mentioned that in a number of states there are 10 commandments being put up. So this is something that was litigated back in the early 1980s, late 1970s. So we're having to relitigate that in various states, including Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas. And so that's one thing this bill is designed to do. But also there's the issue that kids are being put in uncomfortable and sometimes coercive situations because of religious pressure from their teachers or coaches. Families are losing control over their children's religious education. Teachers and administrators can be stuck guessing, especially when courts are flip-flopping on their rulings. It's really hard as a teacher, and I'm a school board member too, so I can speak from the perspective of the school administration. It's really hard to give direction to your teachers and say this is the rule if you don't know how a court is going to come down. So this brings great clarity within the state public schools. And then rights that once seemed settled are suddenly just so fragile. So that's kind of the main problem that we're trying to fix with this, with the uncertainty of the U.S. Supreme Court and the Establishment Clause. We are trying to make that as a matter of state law, you will have the protections that you have come to expect in your public schools.
So some of the issues that we've seen in public schools right now and why this bill is so important is that simply administrators don't know what their obligations are. The Supreme Court has muddied the waters so much that it is confusing. There's a lot of ambiguity with educators and administrators alike, that this bill just drives it home what is clearly expected of them and what their rights and obligations are to ensure that their students are coming into public schools in a welcoming and inclusive environment. It's also important to understand what the KPOP Act doesn't do. It does not ban personal private school prayer, religious school clubs, or even prevent students from wearing religious regalia. It does not restrict private expression of faith. It certainly does not target religion, and it does not limit teachers, educators, or administrators from practicing their own personal beliefs on their private time. This bill simply protects religion by keeping government out of it. So it's important to remember that the KPOP Act simply upholds existing Establishment Clause Supreme Court precedent. All we're trying to do with this bill, we're not trying to change the law, we are just trying to get it into state statutes to ensure that public school students have the opportunity to come to school, learn, and be free from any coercive and divisive environment.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if the U.S. Supreme Court leaves the Establishment Clause alone, which I wouldn't bet on, but it's possible, right? Then this bill really is duplicative. It wouldn't really change the law substantively in any way.
So we do have a toolkit that we will introduce later, but I think one of the really interesting lines that we have in this toolkit, and I think that's something that can be used up front, is this bill protects religion by keeping government out of it. You hear that a lot from the Christian right? The separation of church and state is to keep government out of religion. Okay, well, that's what we're trying to do here as well, right? I think this bill accomplishes both. It protects the students and leaves students to worship as they wish.
And by the way, that toolkit that Ryan mentioned is going to be available on our website soon if it's not already up there, so you can check down in the description of this video, and we'll be putting a link there when it's available. Kevin, I'm wondering, as we are talking about the particular things that this bill would fix, do you have any stories that come to mind about times where you have kids where the SSA has gotten involved, where the Establishment Clause and basic state-church separation have been really important in protecting a kid's religious liberty at public schools?
Many times when we've had students who are experiencing, obviously, cases of preference or discrimination, FFRF and the lawyers there have been actively involved. But very recently, and I think we continue to see a progression of more religious privilege in schools now, especially with the current administration and with laws that are being pushed through. But to give you some very specific examples that happened last semester, so a high school in Washington State, we had an SSA chapter that was wanting to be approved by the high school, which is the typical process. So the SSA chapter was held back while 7 other clubs at the same time went through. And so we've continued to see that happening a little bit more now. It was on a decrease, and now we're seeing that rise again, where secular groups are being held up, while religious groups are moving ahead. And in that same high school, the student clubs aren't allowed to have meetings during meetings and events during the academic periods. And so they have to do it after school. However, every Friday, the Christian club is allowed to have a big event in the library, and we're inviting all of the students to attend, and even staff members coming, inviting the students to leave the cafeteria and go to the library to join. And so obviously where there is prayer happening, and obviously religious content of the Christian club. So we very much see that. In Florida, not a surprise. It was the National Honor Society starts out with an invocation, which is a Christian prayer. And one of our students proposed to have a banned books weeks, and talking about books that have been banned in Florida. So very relevant to the conversation, but was told that she could not have that event because they were worried about some of the state laws that might be in violation because of that. So, and then in Texas, again, not a surprising state where we see things happening, but where students were sent to a career day, and so had many different speakers, and one of those was a preacher. And our student who was at the school describes it as it wasn't let's talk about what it means to be a career preacher. It was a full-on sermon in which the entire student body was required to attend. And so even, God has a plan for you sort of language being involved in there. And then our student at that same school, when the holiday displays were Christmas trees and very Christian decorations, proposed to have a winter solstice event and do stargazing as a sort of an alternative to that, and was rejected by the schools. So we continue to see things happening, and the diversity of that's coming through is continuing to increase as well.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So thank you for all of that. Those are, very typical examples, I'd say, unfortunately, of the stuff that we see all over the country with FFRF. And a lot of those, I think, you could kind of understand if you follow the Supreme Court, that someone like Brett Kavanaugh might come up with some justification to say, I don't really see the problem with this, blatantly unequal treatment of a secular student club versus a Christian student club. They might say, we don't see an Establishment Clause violation there. So that's where this bill would step in and say, as a matter of state law, you are not allowed to do this. You are required to remain neutral as a public school on matters relating to religion. For people who know their Supreme Court history, I want to give a quick rundown of some of the Supreme Court cases that we are grounding this bill in. And this is a selling point when we are presenting this bill as an idea to legislators. We obviously came up with the idea of the bill. We worked with our coalition partners at American Atheists and the American Humanist Association to draft some sample language. And we are trying to root this bill in well-established Supreme Court precedent so that there's no real debate about this, reshaping the legal landscape. All we're doing is taking well-established federal constitutional law and sticking it into state law as a added protection, or the lawyer expression I like is it's a belt and suspenders approach, right? Where if one fails, you've got the other ready to hold up your pants. So here's a quick rundown. So this bill would prohibit school-sponsored prayer or Bible readings. This is the Engel v. Vitale ruling in Schempp from 1962 and 63. It would prohibit school-sponsored prayers at graduation events, at school athletic events, for instance. So this is Levy-Weissman and Santa Fe versus Doe from the 90s and early 2000s. It would prohibit school-sponsored religious displays, including the Ten Commandments. So that's Stone v. Graham, 1980. It would prohibit religious instruction disguised as science, which we're currently seeing. And Ryan, maybe you can weigh in a second on that. That's the Edwards versus Aguilar decision. That was 1987. And so we're also seeing protections in the bill for personal religious expression and reasonable accommodations. So, this bill does not encroach on religious students. And with the types of situation that Kevin mentioned, where if you have a kid who wants to express their religious beliefs or their religious traditions in their schoolwork, as long as they're doing their schoolwork, not only would this bill not interfere with that, this bill actually specifically safeguards that and says this is a student's right to express their religious perspectives, but of course they do have to actually do the schoolwork. It can't be the situation like what Kevin was describing where someone wants basically a religious exemption from doing the work. So I mentioned creationism, intelligent design, just as a little tangent. Ryan, do you want to mention how that's coming up recently?
Yeah, so you may or may not know, I'm pretty sure everybody on this show right now knows that state legislative sessions are starting to ramp up. And with that, we're starting to see pre-filed bills. I just looked at a pre-filed bill today in Arizona that seeks to teach intelligent design or creationism, however they want to frame that term. It wants to mandate that schools teach intelligent design alongside the theory of evolution, which is directly in the face of Edwards v. Aguilar from '87. So this isn't the first time we've seen it pop up. I know it's popped up, I want to say last year, at least the last couple of years. So this is just more illustration of why this bill is necessary. They're starting to chip away at these Supreme Court cases. We talked about Stone v. Graham. I don't know how many times that's come up that they've tried to push the Ten Commandments in. They're still, they being the Christian right, are still doing it. So these pre-filed bills are a really good indication of where they want to take the law and why this is so important.
And just a couple years ago, it would have been basically unthinkable to say that they would propose a bill to require public school classrooms to put up the Ten Commandments, because this has been long settled. And lo and behold, it happened. We're having to fight about it. So that is the reason we are going with this bill.
Kansas, Oklahoma, and Vermont already have committed to running this bill. So right now in Kansas, we have Representative Heather Meyer, who has already introduced the bill. It's House Bill 2431. In Oklahoma, we have Representative Michelle McCain, who has authored the bill. That doesn't have a bill number yet, as far as I'm aware. Their legislative session starts February 2nd, so that is something to look forward to. And lastly, in Vermont, Representative Monique Priestley introduced the bill there as well. And we're also working with a coalition to reach out to legislators across the country, and we're starting to get an upswell of support to at least discuss the bill and possibly introduce it. It's really difficult to get a bill introduced or even to a hearing or anything like that the first year. So the fact that we've gotten three states or three legislators in different states to commit to introducing the bill and running the bill is super, just really cool to see.
And regardless of where you live, if this bill is of interest to you, I would strongly recommend this is a great time to reach out to your state rep and your state senator and tell them this bill exists. A lot of people probably don't know about it yet because it's just been rolled out, but I would really like to see it. And you can point to these states to say, we'll see how this bill develops here. And you can take the language and hopefully introduce it in your state as well. We'll be organizing through the FFRF Action Fund some lobbying efforts to push this bill and to educate legislators about the bill and why it's so important. Kevin, do you see a lot of desire amongst SSA members to engage in efforts with things like legislation. This is something that, I love to do, but I mean, I'm kind of a nerd that way. This is my nerdy area. Is this something among younger people that you are seeing an interest in, or do you think it's more something that once they get older, they start to pay attention to?
I think since the current administration has been in place and the sort of crackdown on, CRT, DEI, in Florida, when you look at higher education, there's rules that make it more difficult for the racial-based LGBT groups, women's groups, disability groups, student groups to get funding and have meeting spaces. We're seeing it. There's also a reflection of that in Texas as well. So we're definitely seeing, we were worried that was going to inhibit students from speaking up, but it's been the exact opposite. And so students are becoming much more active, not so much in the legislative bill aspects, but speaking up at school boards, regional school boards, going to their state capitals and testifying. So we definitely are seeing an increase in that, even at the high school level. So we are fully supporting that, allying students with groups in their local communities that can help them with talking points and help them with training on what to do when they go and speak at those. But we've shared video of our students in Texas doing that. So we're definitely seeing an increase in that. We're doing everything that we can do to support that as well. And, our students are continue to be more proactive in West Texas. We actually have a student who sued the university when the president of the university canceled a fundraiser drag show, citing in his letter to the entire campus his biblical and religious faith of why he was canceling that. So our students and through the LGBT group on campus sued, and that is actually going in front of a judge at the end of this month. So we hope to have some much more information about that soon. So yes, our students are definitely active, and we want to continue to support them in what they're doing.
When we do lobbying and we're going to educate legislators, it's one thing to have a lawyer, an experienced professional come up and present to them, and that certainly has its place. You need to have that role filled, but it's hard to compare when you have a hearing about public schools to a public school student coming up and sharing their own story. I think that is always going to be more effective, frankly, than someone who knows more about the law and kind of can dive into the policy. So the kids that are members of SSA and otherwise are going to be absolutely key in getting this bill passed, because they're the ones who can show up and say, I want this bill passed and here's why. It's not just, this legislator and the SSA and the FFRF Action Fund, but it's me, an actual live public school student.
Public testimony is so effective, but I understand it can be nerve-wracking going in and talking to a legislator or testifying in front of a committee. We've developed a toolkit that has resources to help you better advocate for this legislation. In that toolkit, you'll find scripts, different talking points, some templates in there that will all help you and guide you in talking to legislators, engaging with them, and promoting this legislation across the country.
Our students are doing a lot more work, interfaith work, and collaborating with a variety of students. And so the reality is what we're seeing in public education now is Christian privilege and white Christian nationalism. And so I know for our students, at Baylor University, they worked together in coalition with the Muslim students and the Hindu students about seeking official recognition at Baylor University and not having to do a Christian statement of faith to become a registered student organization. So we're continuing to see those patterns, and I think for our chapters and our students, but also for FFRF members and advocates, that's also crucially important, because what we're really talking about is the privileging of Christianity, and we need the voices of other religious groups as well to come and say, we want this because it protects our religious freedom.
One thing I just wanted to mention, Kevin, is I'm consistently blown away every time I go to an SSA convention or see one of your students' groups out in public, if you will, at the the poise and the confidence that they have to speak up in the face of opposition. You just named some pretty hostile ground that your chapters are speaking up in, right? Like West Texas, Baylor is not a terribly, shall I say, friendly environment to free thinkers. So I really just want to commend your students, and I think if we can get this bill or these talking points in front of your students, students, SSA students, I think it would be in very good hands.
And I think one of the things I really love about this bill is, the far right, Christian machine has been great at doing bills and pushing them in one state, sampling them in the one state, and then marking them out to every state. And so I love that FFRF is taking this proactive approach in developing a bill that really seeds the groundwork of establishing the real version of religious freedom, and makes that much more accessible to everyone. And if we can get that groundwork in, hopefully we won't see as much as what we're currently seeing now, and this can be a preventative, proactive measure.
And in order to make that sort of strategy work, as you mentioned, Kevin, you need to be working with groups that are not just like you. So that's something we're aiming to do. In addition to our kind of typical partners in crime, our secular coalition partners, we are also going to be working with public school advocates and then interfaith groups, the Interfaith Alliance and Christians Against Christian Nationalism, lots of groups that we've worked with before and we're largely aligned with, but we're going to have to be engaging with a lot of different people, because when you take this proactive approach, it can't be just one voice that's coming in and trying to tell a state, here's something we think you should do. It needs to be a groundswell of support. So that's the stage we're in right now, is building that support and letting people know that this bill exists, what it's all about, and why they should support it. And toward that end, I wanted to mention some of the key messaging points. And this is something that you'll also see in our toolkit, where when you're talking about this bill with your legislator or with other folks who you want to turn into advocates for the bill, we lay out how you can talk about the bill in a way that is pro-freedom, pro-fairness, pro-family, and pro-fiscal responsibility. So these are points that if you're talking to someone who is not maybe already a strong advocate on the Religious Liberty Establishment Clause, state-church separation issues. When we talk internally, it's like we all care very passionately about that, so we don't need a lot of convincing. But for some other people, that's not top of mind for them. And so we give some tools in the toolkit for how you can talk to folks about maybe getting them over that hump and explain to them why they should maybe support this bill. And so one thing maybe that directly leads into is we've tried to think through what are some possible concerns that might come up and what are some possible hurdles or roadblocks that we might run into, probably from legislators who are actively trying to put things like the Ten Commandments and chaplains and mandated Bible readings into public school classrooms.
Most importantly, I think what we need to remember is that this bill does not infringe on anybody's religious rights or their right to practice privately their faith, right? Simply what it does is it protects the religious freedom of students who come into the schools expecting to get an education free from indoctrination. That's all this bill really seeks to do. And there are some concerns that we have anticipated that we've included in the toolkit. And some of those include the fact that some people might argue that this attacks religion. And it does not. It absolutely does not. It protects religious freedom by ensuring that the government does not favor one faith over others or pressure kids into participating. It also permits private prayer, student-initiated clubs, religious clothing, and personal expression of faith, as the Supreme Court has already held is completely legal and fine. So another counter-argument that we anticipate hearing is schools need moral guidance. Schools already teach civics like kindness, integrity, honesty, and respect without religious indoctrination. Moral guidance needs to come from families and faith community outside of the public school arena. We also anticipate hearing that this bill goes too far. Every provision in this bill rests on existing Supreme Court precedent. This bill simply protects personal religious expression and reasonable accommodations. Why now? Because the federal courts are shifting and protections we've relied on for decades may not hold up. States need to step up now to protect their kids.
And so if you are interested in joining us in this fight and helping to get this bill advanced and to educate lawmakers about this, please follow the work we do. So follow FFRF, and in particular, our lobbying affiliate, the FFRF Action Fund, which you can find at ffrfaction.org. Kevin, do you want to share how people can follow the work that you're doing at SSA and any other final thoughts on the bill?
Even Christian parents would not want someone else from a different denomination, even within Christianity, teaching their religious values and their religious dogma to their children. And so, I think the heart of what this does and keeping religion out of the public system allows parents and families to teach their values, their religious values to their students, rather than having someone else. If they're Baptist, they may not want Catholics doing that. If they're Catholics, they may not want the Methodists doing that. So even within Christianity, we see this. Christian politicians and talking with Christian people, I think that's an important message that rings true for them. For people who are interested in learning more about the Secular Student Alliance, our website, Secular Students, with an S, secularstudents.org, is an easy place to find us. We do have information on there and post stories, but it's also easy. Just go to the bottom and click to receive our newsletter. We send a short, easy weekly newsletter, which talks about what we're doing, what our students are doing, upcoming events and webinars, programs, our conference, our scholarships. So we're happy to share all of that information as well. So
awesome. And again, thank you so much for joining us, Kevin Bolling at the Secular Student Alliance. And that wraps up this episode of Secular Spotlight. So thank you again. If you'd like to support our mission, consider becoming a member at ffrf.org. And again, the FFRF Action Fund is ffrfaction.org. And please like this episode and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an episode. Again, you can catch the link to our toolkit in the description below as soon as that's ready. And thank you so much for watching, and we will see you all next time.
I'm Brendan, and I'm an out-of-the-closet atheist. I was raised Catholic. I never really thought deeply about what I truly believed in until I saw the movie Religulous. That's what made me think about what I actually believed in. Because only through a critiquing of what you believe in can you know what you truly believe in.